How many? How many? How many? How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. What did I get up to?
Breaking news.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of How Many, the only podcast on the internet that counts. I am one of your hosts, Jesse Jackson. We have a full crew today. We have Scott, we have Bob, we have Gary, and we have Junior. And as tradition, we pull back the obit page and we talk about significant deaths. Junior, is this the last quarter?
I went ahead and did September through December, and these will
Okay.
be all of the deaths that I could see that were of significance. Now, as we've seen before, there'll be times where I miss some names that I may not have recognized that you guys would know. So obviously there'll probably be honorable mentions as we go along. I ended up with a total of 40 names. I did try and cull it to the ones that I think we would really be able to have some feedback on, but there may be some on here that you guys have no idea who it is.
All right, I will start. It seems like we usually think a lot of these, but I'm going to go 25. So, Scott
I'm gonna lowball 24.
and Bob.
I'm going to go high because we always seem like we rubber stamp most people. I'll say 33.
Gary?
A third, 33 and a third.
I'll go 34.
Yeah, since I don't know how many you guys are going to actually approve of, I'm going to take the over because I think there may be some honorable mentions that I missed. So I'm going to go ahead and go 35. So starting in September, we have Willard Scott, who was a weatherman, was on the Today Show. And note in here saying that he was the creator of Ronald McDonald. I had no idea
Really?
that he had any hand in the creation of Ronald McDonald.
I think he was the original one that played him on
Yes.
TV.
On the local
okay.
thing. Yeah, I read Willard Scott's book and he had talked about that he was the very first Ronald McDonald before it went national. Yeah, I think even without that, his birthday greetings to people that are over 100 years old and the Today Show, I think that's significant.
Yeah, he was on the Today Show for a long time.
Bazillion years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say yes to, then we will say yes to Willard Scott. Next up, and this one may be a little obscure, Anthony Johnson, who was an actor. For people that have seen the movie Friday, he was Azeel,
It's Ezel.
who was the guy that was breaking into Debo's house. I remember the character more than the name.
Smokey, you know I ain't the smartest man in the world, but from over here, it look like you taking a Ezel, get the hell on my back. Let's smoke, you been eating corn, huh? Oh, get the hell on my back. All right, man, but look, between me and you, man, when you're done, I'll clean all that up for you for $2.
But I have a feeling that me and Gary are probably the only two that would know this person.
I do not recognize the name, and I think I've seen the movie once because Chris made us.
He's a pretty
It's a very
memorable
funny movie.
character, but
All right, so it looks like we're going to have to be no's. I'm not going to use an exemption. Next up, I think this one will count. He's been in movies. So in The Wire, he was Omar.
Check it out. Here it comes. Yo, son, come on. Yo, Omar coming, man.
In Boardwalk Empire, he was Chalky.
Oh, yeah. Michael
very,
K. Williams.
very,
Yeah.
very memorable characters. So I think this one is going to be a yes for me. Bob, it sounds like
Yeah.
you're a yes too.
Oh,
also,
yeah,
right?
definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. Very unique face, a really good actor, really good in Boardwalk Empire. So absolutely.
yeah, he was good in everything.
So we will say yes to Michael K. Williams. Next up, Art Metrano, who was an actor. He is best known for being
Police Academy.
Captain Mauser on Police Academy. He was in the second one, I think, specifically.
Mahoney! Lieutenant Mauser wants to see you. Pronto!
Any day now, Mahoney. And your little ass is mine.
You wanted to see me, sir? I hope this isn't going to be too personal. I heard what you said about my little butt. And I don't know how to break this to you, sir. But I'm straight.
And he was in Joni Loves Chachi, which was the TV spinoff of Happy Days. I have a feeling that this one is not going to make it, but I thought it'd be worthy of mention.
No,
Did he ever have any run-ins with Mahoney?
What do you intend to do about Mahoney?
did not recognize the name.
And he's along the same lines of the Ezel character.
Yeah. So, yeah, it sounds like we're going to have to say no on him, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm out on him.
All right. Next up, we have Ben Best, who is a screenwriter, probably his biggest claim to fame. He was the co-creator of the greatness of Eastbound and Down, along with Danny McBride. He was also an actor. He was in Superbad and Land of the Lost. Eastbound and Down is such greatness that I thought, I don't know that we would necessarily count him, but I wanted to at least make a mention of him. So, Bob, you're shaking your head yes. Are you?
Well, I'm shaking my head yes that you're right to have mentioned him, but not significant enough to get into the 3-bedroom apartment. He must go into eternity homeless.
Gary, how about you?
Yeah, he's a no. I mean, the show's funny, but
Yeah, I don't think so.
When you're
Ben.
a spare character on Land of the Lost.
All right, so he's
Exactly.
gone from Ben Best to, unfortunately, Ben Worst.
Yes.
And we will pass him by. Next up, we have Ruben Claymore. He is a board game inventor. His claim to fame was the Game of Life, which obviously backfired on him.
You can be a winner at the game of life. Hey, look, I've got a wife.
Kids and taxes, treasure too.
You can be a winner at the game of life.
The Game of Life from Milton Bradley.
Now, the Game of Life obviously was a very, very popular board game. So being the inventor of that, I think carries some weight, but I
It
don't
had
know
the
that it's
greatest
enough.
topographical board ever, like with the wheel and the
and
little
the spinning. Yeah. I
yeah, and the
love-
little mountains and hills and stuff. I used to love just the way it looked.
When we were in Germany, my dad was stationed in Germany, so we bought the game then. So I remember, having the little cars and you put the little pegs in the kids. He lived to 99, according to Wikipedia, which we know is never wrong. I think if he had done a couple more games, maybe he would have my vote. I'm on the fence on this one.
I'm with Jesse. I think one game is not sufficient enough. One hit wonder.
Scott, did you ever play this board game?
Every time I ever tried to play the board game, the little spinning wheel was always missing. So I never got into a game of completion with that.
There
I was
was
going to say,
some
Scott,
script
that's not
version of
usually a
this.
problem for you, is it?
honestly, if everybody would have leaned towards in, I would have let him in. I think that is one of the most popular and most played board games of all time.
I will tell you, I said I was on the fence, so I would very easy go to yes, just because of the significance.
All right, then you know what? I'm going to
Yeah.
say yes.
Yeah, I'm going to say yes.
Tip the scales of life.
Yes, I will.
Paddington
yes.
the stats.
Junior, who took the over.
Yeah, we'll say yes then to Ruben Claymore. Next up, I think this is a first ballot, possibly one of the biggest deaths of the year. How about Norm Macdonald, comedian, actor, screenwriter, one of the greatest news people on Saturday Night Live. He had the Norm Show spinoff and one of the funniest movies of, I would say, the 90s, Dirty Work. He is a definite yes for me. Anybody want to say no to Norm Macdonald?
He's iconic, and some of the best Saturday Night Live weekend updates. Absolutely.
And of course, the greatness of Turd Ferguson.
Mr. Reynolds has apparently changed his name to Turd Ferguson.
Yeah, that's right. Turd Ferguson. It's a funny name.
I'm kind of thinking he may be the best news anchor that Saturday Night Live ever had. It's either him or Dennis Miller, probably.
He's
right?
probably my favorite.
Yeah, Dennis Miller was greatness too, but Norm Macdonald is probably my favorite.
As they say, he's in the discussion.
And of course, Norm got fired for making jokes about OJ. Because the president of the network was buddies with OJ. He didn't like all the jokes.
In his book, O.J. Simpson says that he would have taken a bullet or stood in front of a train for Nicole. Man, I'm going to tell you, that is some bad luck when the one guy who would have died for you kills you.
Very, very bad firing because I think they replaced him with Colin Quinn, and he was pretty spare.
Exactly.
Dang it.
Yeah.
He needed to stay on remote control.
Yeah, he needed to stay on remote control.
And now, it's his basement, it's his room, it's his game show. The Quizmaster of 72 whooping Corp Lane, Ken Ober.
All right, next up, we have Willie Garson, who was an actor. He was on Sex and the City. He was Stanford Blatch.
Yeah.
In addition to being on White Collar and John from Cincinnati. I know the actor, I know the face, but I never really watched Sex and the City, so I didn't really know much about his character. But I figured he would be at least worthy of some discussion. What do you guys think?
I recognized him immediately. He's done a lot of work, a pretty solid character actor, really good in White Collar. I didn't watch Sex and the City either, but I did watch that. And so, yeah, I would vote yes for him.
That's a no for me. I don't know who he is.
Man, you look at his stuff, he did just tons. You know, he was in Cheers, CSI Investigation, Pushing Daisies, Stargate.
Yeah, he was in a million
Buffy Vampire
shows.
Slayer, Friends. Yeah, I mean, he was pretty heavy.
Very recognizable face.
Yeah, I think so.
He's a yes for me. I mean, he's a guy that has been in 1 to 3 episodes of every major television show for the last 20 years. You know, not everybody's a star, and you need character actors, and that's what he is. And I liked him. So, yeah, it's a yes for me.
Yeah, I count him.
All right, so it sounds like we have enough. We'll go ahead and say yes to Willie Garson. Next up, we have Melvin Van Peebles, who was a director, actor, playwright.
Mario's dad.
Yeah, I was going to say his biggest claim to fame, though, may be that he is the father of Mario Van Peebles. He did do Sweetback's Badass Song, as well as Posse, which I guess was on Broadway.
My posse's on Broadway.
I would count him. He's kind of known, especially in African-American film, as a kind of a known director and held in high regard.
Yeah, I'll go with it. I recognize him just mostly because of his son, but yeah.
I'm going to give him a yes.
And when you start talking about like the late 60s and the 70s blaxploitation films, he was very big in that. That genre of movies was very important to getting work for a lot of African-American actors that couldn't get it otherwise, especially in starring roles, playing the hero and things like that. So I think those things were really a significant part of the movement to be more inclusive later on. Absolutely a yes for me.
All right, so it looks like we have enough. So we're going to go ahead and say yes to Mr. Van Peebles. Next up, we have Sue Thompson, who is an American pop and country singer. She did a song called Sad Movies Make Me Cry, but for P1s, the song that she is probably best known for is the Norman song, which is many times used in the promos for the Normathon.
Norman! 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 Norman!
Norman, my love.
Anybody that listens to The Ticket and has ever listened to the Normathon, that song is embedded into your brain.
But
Norman gets her in.
So you're a yes, Bob?
Yes, I have to.
Gary?
No.
Gary's a no. Scott?
No.
Jesse?
I'm going to give some support to Bob, hoping that later when I need support, he'll give it to me.
You know what? Since I am so familiar with that song, I'm going to give her a yes.
Unbelievable.
The greatness of Norman. So that
Have we
concludes
cheapened this discussion? Okay.
a little bit, but I mean, P1s will appreciate that we put Sue Thompson in. All right, so that concludes my list for September. So do we have some honorable mentions we need to discuss?
George Frayne the Fourth, aka Commander Cody. Cody.
Of his Lost Planet Airmen? Yeah, I would count Commander Cody. That was the nickname Chris Berman gave Cody Carlson back in the late 80s.
I am not familiar with Commander Cody.
He was a musician. Late 60s. He's more of a 70s guy. Blues and rock. Probably one of his biggest hits was a cover of Hot Rod Lincoln.
Yes. I was thinking that was him. Son, you're going to drive me drinking if you don't stop driving that Hot Rod Lincoln.
My pappy said,
son, you're going to drive me drinking if you don't stop driving that Hot Rod Lincoln.
What's really interesting about that is we have those vinyl parties, and my son came to the vinyl party and throws this on the turntable, and he says this is a song he's been trying to learn for years. The deal with the vinyl party is whenever you play a song, you tell a story. And the beginning of the story for this song was me and my dad were driving through New Mexico listening to a real alt radio station, and this song came on. And it's like, any story that starts that way has got to be great, right? But the very next day that he played that song, Commander Cody died.
Wow.
Kiss
So
of death.
you guys killed Commander Cody?
I guess we did.
Very Clarence Clement.
Hopefully it wasn't drug related, because then he'd be Commander Odie.
All right, so does everybody want to support Scott on Commander Cody?
I will support Scott.
All right, so
I
we're
support
gonna
Scott, but I almost pulled my support because of that terrible joke by Bob.
All right, so we will say yes to that honorable mention. Gary, you said you have one?
So the first one was Tommy Kirk.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
From Old Yeller.
See that?
Yes.
Yeah. Old Yeller, Shaggy Dog, Swiss Family Robinson, Absent-Minded Professor.
He was Kurt Russell before Kurt Russell
Yeah,
was Kurt
Yes,
Russell.
he was.
I considered
Exactly.
him, but he was part of the culling I did.
No,
Wait,
he's
you're wrong.
Put Sue Thompson in, but you didn't.
Yes, mainly for the ticket angle.
yeah, no, he was amazing. One of my favorite lines is, him going and, "Oh, Yella, just save your life."
Old Yeller just saved your life, and Elizabeth too.
Later came out, then Walt Disney, nothing because
Cut ties.
Yeah, cut ties totally. For the genre at that time, great actor. So, I grew up watching Disney film. Yeah, this guy is somebody significant.
That's a good ad, Gary.
Yeah,
All right,
really
so
good.
we'll say yes then to Tommy Kirk.
There's one more. I don't know if you guys will care, but Adlai Stevenson, I think that's a pretty significant
The presidential candidate.
as far as being a politician goes. I mean,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's
he's not just a presidential candidate. He was in the Illinois House of Representatives in the U.S. Senate, and he ran for governor several times.
He was a pretty big figure
yeah, I
in
agree.
politics.
All right.
Scott,
Yeah,
you
that's
you
pretty
know
good.
him, right, Scott?
Yes, I know him.
So I have two, one shtick, one real. Galen O'Harity was an Irish actor who was Chuck on Happy Days.
Oh, first season.
Yes, they wrote him out and never talked about him again until the final episode. We're like, Chuck.
I remember the bit with Chuck was no matter where they were, he always had his basketball with him.
Is that Chuck?
Guess what's in the bag, Mom?
Your basketball.
And there was the Christmas episode. They had wrapped a basketball, and Opie Cunningham, Ron Howard, bounced it, and Chuck's like, "Hey, it might be fragile."
Well, he was definitely Billy Tubbs' favorite Happy Days character.
That's good to hear, Chuck.
He was in Never Say Never Again, Willow. He was in Superman 3. I don't think enough. That was mostly shtick. What I don't think is shtick is Jay Sandrich. He
invented the
was
sandwich.
no, he was American Hall of Fame television director. And according to Wikipedia, which we all know is never wrong, he started out as assistant director in I Love Lucy and Andy Griffin Show. And then he ended up producing or directing The Bill Dana Show, Bill Cosby Show, Get Smart, Odd Couple, Soap, 2/3 of the episode of Mary Tyler Moore, the first 3 seasons of The Cosby Show, did pilots for Bob Newhart Show, WKRP in Cincinnati, Benson, Empty Nest, and Golden Girls. He also, his last work as a director on television was an episode of 2.5 Men.
Sounds like a pretty strong resume.
Man.
Yeah.
I recognize the name. I remember always seeing his name in the credits in those shows.
Well, I didn't recognize the name, but I think the resume has me leaning towards yes on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even was a producer on Get Smart. Now,
That's an impressive resume. I'd say yes.
Okay, so we
All
will
right.
say yes to the inventor of the sandwich.
We'll say, hey, buddy, help me out with a sandwich.
Hey, buddy, could you help me out with a sandwich? Well, sure. Where is it?
So let's move into October, and we are going to start with Betty Lynn, who was an actress on The Andy Griffith Show, Cheaper by the Dozen, and Meet Me in Las Vegas. So I think Andy Griffith Show was probably her biggest role, though, right?
I think, wasn't she Barney Fife's girlfriend?
Yes, she
Wasn't
was.
she Thelma?
Yeah.
I believe so.
She wasn't Juanita.
No, Juanita was like fake, wasn't she? Like, or you never
heard-
saw her. He just
never saw her.
referenced
She
her.
was just always Juanita at the diner.
One of my favorite writers, Mark Evanier, he was involved with the Garfield cartoon, was writer and director and producer. And growing up, she was his next door neighbor. And he said that she was like a second mom to him and one of the nicest, sweetest people ever in the world. So I'm going to vote for him just because of Mark, because he thought so highly of her. She did other things besides, but that was her biggest role.
I'll give Betty Lynn the nod because she was on the good years of Andy Griffith.
Yeah, I remember her from Andy Griffith, so I'll count her too.
I was really on the fence, but if everybody's okay with it, then I'm okay with it.
All right, then we will go ahead and put her in. Next up, we have William Lucking, who was an actor. His biggest claim to fame with us, and specifically Bob and Gary and me, is he was Piney in Sons of Anarchy, carrying around his oxygen machine. So I guess it finally ran out of air. He was also in The Rundown and The Magnificent Seven Ride, but I think Piney is probably his biggest role.
Been in a lot of stuff. Just looking at his face, I recognize him.
I've never seen Sons of Anarchy. That's on my list of things that I know I need to look at sometime, but I would vote yes if I know that's a show that has a lot of great acting.
I'd be in for Piney, yeah.
Yeah, Piney's his most notable role, but he does have, like Scott said, a lot longer IMDb career.
All right, so we will say yes then to Mr. Lucking. Next up, we have a political one. How about Colin Powell, general and politician, Secretary of State, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, pretty big name in the political world and the military world. So I'm going to give him a yes.
Yeah, that's an easy yes.
Yeah, I think
easy
so.
one. First ballot.
I mean, that's a pretty significant, yeah.
Next up, we have Jay Black, who was a singer for Jay and the Americans, and they had a couple of hits. This Magic Moment. Anybody familiar with that song?
Yep. This magic moments. Yeah. This magic moments.
And Come a Little Bit Closer. Anybody familiar with that one?
Come a little bit closer. Come a little bit closer. The other notable thing about Jay and the Americans is that was the first writing gig Steely Dan ever got. They got hired to write for Jay and the Americans.
All right. So is everybody a yes for Jay?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll say yes. I do recognize him.
Yeah, I will not be a silent Bob on this one. I'll say yes.
Next up, I think probably the most significant death of October. How about Peter Scolari, actor from Bosom Buddies, Newhart. He was on the HBO show Girls. I would say yes to him, mainly for Bosom Buddies for me, but he was also solid on Newhart.
Yeah, that Newhart character was massive shake laugh.
You see, I've been having these feelings for you. Feelings that a doctor should not be having for her patient.
You mean you don't like me?
Quite the opposite.
You mean I don't like you?
Yeah, he was really good in that. Really good guy. Yeah, and I loved him in Bosom Buddies. So yeah, I definitely think so.
All right. So it sounds like he's a first ballot as well.
Yeah.
They even sang about him in Hollywood Nights, right, Gary? Scolari. Oh.
All right. So we'll say yes to Mr. Scolari. Next up, we have James Michael Tyler, who was
Gunther.
He was Gunther on Friends. He was also on a show called Motel Blue, but I think Gunther was probably his biggest role.
Have you seen Chandler?
I thought you were Chandler. But one of you's over there.
Boy, that's
a significant role.
That's
a pretty iconic
role
character.
Friends, yeah.
That guy.
I'm gonna say yes.
I think he's a yes too. Honestly, that guy 10, 15 years after that show goes off the air, if that guy walked down the street in any major city, people knew who he was.
If it had been another show that wasn't as big, you probably wouldn't count it. But Friends was such a huge show, and that was such a notable character.
Yeah,
you have to count it.
I think we're going to go ahead and move forward with yes on him. Next up, we have Mort Saul, Canadian-born American comedian and actor. He was in Love and War and All the Young Men.
He was in what?
All the Young Men.
He was probably the second biggest comic of the 60s after
Jesse,
Lenny
it's a
Bruce.
good thing he wasn't in Walt Disney stuff then, huh?
I actually was typing his name because I figured you would skip it. He was one of the first political comedians.
When a man is elected and you say you've got to like him, that's the same as discovering you're pregnant and trying to fall in love as rapidly as you can.
Lenny Bruce, Jonathan Winters, George Carlin, Richard Pryor, Louis Black, and Woody Allen say he was very much his influence. And John F. Kennedy, according to Wikipedia, which we know is never wrong, actually asked him to write jokes as he was campaigning.
Scott says yes as well. Yeah. Bob and Gary, you guys are yeses?
Yeah.
All right, so we will put Mr. Saul in. So that's all I had for October. Do we have any honorable discuss?
Eddie Robinson. This is a guy that played baseball, and he actually played for the Rangers.
I am not familiar with that Eddie Robinson.
Yeah, he
Dude's
played,
100 years old.
He was a general manager for the Texas Rangers. Atlanta Braves, was a World Series champion in 1948.
So
Oldest
Gary,
living player to play on a World Series winning team, and the
Dirty Dugout.
Dirty Dugout.
We say hello again to Dirty Dug Out.
Hey, good morning to you fellas. These players today are too soft, I tell ya.
Mm-hmm.
I would oftentimes steal second with a cigarette in each hand, a dip in my mouth, and a cigar poised in my lips.
Does anybody want to support Eddie Robinson?
I will, because, he was a Texas Ranger.
I mean, he's not even the most famous Eddie Robinson. Out.
You know what, Gary? I'm going to support you. I'm going to say yes to this Eddie Robinson.
Because you had the over.
Addington the stats.
How are we on tossing in P1s?
Well, certainly.
October, yes.
Yeah, one of
Mr.
for sure.
Jeff Finkley.
Finkley, yeah.
Jeff Finkley.
All right. Do you want to give a P1 honorable yes to the beer man himself, Jeff Finkley?
I mean,
Beerman.
Aren't P1s just automatics?
I think P1s are automatics.
They ought to be
I think so. Yeah, I agree.
All right. So
You
P1
give
of
him the
note.
hardline salute and put him in.
Stay hard, Jeff.
Stay hard, Jeff. And then David Ramirez.
Ramwow.
Oh, yes.
He ran.
Ramwow.
Ram.
Very notable and was one of the moderators on the great P1CR Facebook group. So we will say yes to Mr. Ramirez as well.
I don't know how far this one will go, but I'm going to throw it in anyway because I knew who he was. Patty Maloney from the Chieftains. Do you guys even know who the Chieftains are?
I don't
Yeah, I know who the Chieftains are.
Yeah.
If you knew the Chieftains, then you knew who Patty Maloney was.
I am not familiar with Patty Maloney and were the Chieftains. What was their big hit?
I don't know if they had any big.
They're like
They only had
folk.
about 30 albums, but they were an Irish folk band.
Okay, so does anybody want to give any support to Patty? What about Selma? All right, it sounds like a no to Patty.
Yeah, that's all right. And I would be very remiss if I didn't throw in Gary Paulson.
His name was Gary Paulson.
His name is Robert Paulson. His name is Robert Paulson. This is all the way. His name is Robert Paulson.
The writer of the Hatchet series that inspired so many kids throughout the late 90s and the 2000s.
I did not know he died. Last year I reread The Hatchet because it was assigned when Chris was in junior high. Of course, he didn't read it, but I did. And I went through, I read the whole series, and then I reread the original this past year, but didn't want to spring for the $7 or $8 for the rest of them. I'm like, oh no, I'll do that another time. Maybe when they're on sale. I would vote for him. That's an iconic series. It's an iconic book.
Bob, Gary, you guys familiar with the Hatchet Man?
I've never heard of the Hatchet.
Hatchet Man.
You've never heard of Hatchet, really, Bob?
Not a book or series.
It's a great book. The premise is he's flying to Alaska, and his parents had separated, and he got a hatchet as a gift before he left, and the plane crashes. The story is him surviving by himself.
Did he name the Hatchet Molly?
All right, so Bob, it sounds like you don't know Gary Paulson.
I mean, by all means, bury the hatchet, but
okay.
Gary,
you can axe Gary.
Jesse and Scott are still on their own.
All right, so it sounds
Got
like
one
we're
more.
going to say no to Mr. Paulson, unfortunately.
Joanna Cameron.
Yes.
She was ISIS on Saturday
ISIS.
morning TV.
The Shazam and ISIS hour where they drove around in the Winnebago.
The Shazam ISIS Hour. A full hour of exciting adventure with the world's most powerful mortals.
Oh, I remember her.
I remember it being a big deal when some photos of her made an appearance in a certain Hefner published magazine.
Yes.
Oh, now you got me interested.
I certainly remember loving that series because that was all you could get. I mean, there was no superheroes on TV, so that lame Shazam and ISIS was as close as we got, you know?
And it was always late Saturday morning after the cartoons, like at 11:30 or 12 or something. It was like the last thing they'd air before they'd turn it over to adult programming.
So are we saying yes then to Joanna Cameron? Was anybody a no?
I'll counter despite the uncomfortable name of ISIS.
I could be persuaded into a yes on that. I remembered her once I saw her.
All right. You know what? I'm gonna say yes too. So we'll go ahead and add in Joanna Cameron. Gary, did you have any?
Yeah, so you missed Granville Adams. You guys might not know who he is just by the name, but if you were to look at him, you might remember him. He was in Oz and Homicide: Life on the Street.
I considered him, but I didn't know that an Oz side character was going to be enough.
Didn't he used to play for the Rockets?
So he was in 11 episodes of Homicide: Life on the Street and 48 episodes of Oz.
Yeah.
I'm going to say yes. I never, once again, Oz, one of those shows I should see, but I haven't.
Jesse, you've seen Homicide, right?
Yes.
Now that shows greatness.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Gary, since you brought him up, I assume you're a yes. Bob?
Yeah, I'll count him.
And then the other one that I know that only Bob will vote for is Dick Sizemansky. So Bob is a size queen, though, and that would be something. That
Dick Sizemansky? That sounds like such a made-up name.
It does
so
sound
it's
like
an actual person?
Professional football player and a general manager in the NFL.
I am not familiar with Mr.
I am not either.
Sizemansky.
It is good shtick. Before all of our time when it comes to football, but ironically, he was a center, even though he was Dick Sizemore.
I will add from The Sopranos and a ton of other TV shows, Val Biscoglio. He was Murph in The Sopranos. He was in Miami Vice, Hill Street Blues, Quincy MD.
Ooh, Quincy.
BJ and the Bear, Working Stiffs, Frisco Kid. He played Chief
Ray
Cloud.
Scott, you'll probably remember him from the Frisco Kid.
I did love Quincy. That had a great theme song.
Gentlemen, you are about to enter the most fascinating sphere of police work, the world of forensic medicine.
A good resume.
Yeah. He
that guy.
I'm not familiar with him, but if you guys recognize him, I'm willing to say yes.
He was in the Frisco Kid. I'm telling you, it's an underrated movie.
That is a great movie.
So we'll say yes to Val Biscoglio, but
yes.
No to Dick Sizeman, right?
Got it.
All right. Let's move into November. We're going to start with Dean Stockwell, who was an actor on Quantum Leap, Married to the Mob, Paris, Texas.
Yeah.
He was a child actor, so he was in a ton of stuff.
He's in.
Yeah, he was in all kinds of movies and TV
Quantum
shows.
Leap alone would have got him, but he was in Battlestar Galactica and Blue Velvet. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of which, did Quantum Leap have the most unstable ending in TV show history?
Oh, it was awful.
Yes, and in fact, I absolutely hated that ending, and I love the series, and they're talking about rebooting it, and I'm hoping they will fix that.
Like they were going to send Scott Bakula back, and then all of a sudden you just see text that he never made it. He's dead.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I hated that ending.
All right, but we will say yes to Mr. Stockwell. Okay. How about Graham Edge, who was a Hall of Fame drummer and co-founder of the Moody Blues. Songwriter and a poet.
Did he know it?
He was a poet and he knew it. Yes. Do we want to say yes to Mr. Edge? He's not the most famous Edge. I think U2 has that covered, but
Moody Blues has about 10.
More like maybe 3.
Oh.
It's Knights in White Satin, and they just walk off the stage.
Breathe deep.
Breathe deep. The gathering gloom.
Bob, you're a yes. Jesse?
Yeah, I'll count him.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. How about Sam Huff, who was a Hall of Fame football player for the Giants and the Redskins, both NFC East rivals? Do we want to hold that against him?
He was a badass.
Me, the non-sports guy, recognized the name immediately. So, yeah, I would say yeah.
All right, Gary, you're a yes, obviously.
I mean, I was the most likely to hold it against him, though. But
that's true. Scott, you yes also?
I remember Sam Huff, yeah.
All right, so we'll say yes to Mr. Huff. He is not leaving in a huff. How about...
leaving in a hearse.
How about Philip Margo, who is a musician and co-founder of The Tokens, and their big hit was The Lion Sleeps Tonight.
A weem-a-wep, a weem-a-wep, a weem-a-wep. Anytime, Bob. And weem-a-wep, a weem-a-wep.
Go, the lion sleeps tonight.
A weem-a-wep, a weem-a-wep,
a weem-a-wep, a weem-a-wep.
In the jungle, the mighty
jungle, the lion sleeps tonight.
Thank you, Mushmouth.
Bob went to such a high octane.
Octane?
And octave.
Such a high octane.
High octane of gasoline that he that his mic cut out.
Sorry,
But yeah, that's a huge hit, right? I think they may be a one-hit wonder, but
So there is a whole documentary about that song and about how it originally came from South Africa and about
Oh yeah, I saw that. That was on Netflix, right, Jesse?
the amount of money that was stolen from that. The History of Rock and Roll in 500 Songs did an episode on it that is amazing. Because of the way they stole from the man, I'm going to say no.
I would not have known that's who he was.
Yeah, I'm not going to make a token gesture here. I'm also going to get him out.
all right. So we will say no. How about Dave Frischberg, who was a jazz pianist and songwriter, but his biggest claim to fame, he did the I'm Just a Bill song from
Schoolhouse Rock.
Schoolhouse
Yes.
Rock.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill.
Yes,
So
yes,
that is
yes.
probably, if not the biggest song from that show, say top three. Probably
I would say top three. Conjunction Junction's number one, probably.
Yeah, and then my interjection shows excitement or emotion.
So when you're happy or sad or frightened or mad.
Interjection shows excitement or emotion.
So when you're happy or sad or frightened or mad.
Did you guys ever hear the Schoolhouse Rock CD where all those songs were done by rock bands?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I need to do that.
Yeah, that's the one that Biz Markie did. Energy!
Yes.
Energy. Sometimes I think I'm running out of energy.
I'm going to have to check that out because that sounds great.
That actually came out while I was still working at the music store. We played that thing all the time. And every time we played it, we sold it.
We had that Saturday morning cartoons Universal put out that was all the rock bands doing the theme songs. And I remember the Johnny Quest theme song. Reverend Horton Heat and his band did the Johnny Quest song. And they said that was the hardest song they ever did in their entire lives.
All right. Sounds like we're all yeses for Mr. Frischberg. Next up, we have actor Art LaFleur, who was in Field of Dreams, The Sandlot, The Santa Claus Part 2, kind of typecast as a rugged baseball player. I think he was supposed to be Babe Ruth in The Sandlot.
Yes,
he Molinator.
Was. That guy's name was a running joke with me and a buddy of mine in college because his brother's roommate was named Art, and we could never remember his last name. It was something French sounding. So this actor had been in a couple movies back then, and so we always defaulted and called that guy Art LaFleur without knowing what his last name was.
Yeah, I definitely agree. He is a great character actor. You see his face, you go, "Oh yeah." So
yeah, he's definitely in the same vein as the Sex and the City guy.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So we'll say yes to him. This one may be the biggest death for November. How about Stephen Sondheim, who was a composer? West Side Story, Sweeney Todd.
For decades, the songs of the great Stephen Sondheim, his music and lyrics, enthralled and moved millions of theater and moviegoers, as his mastery transformed the American musical into more than mere entertainment. From the melancholy of Send in the Clowns from A Little Night Music,
Send in the clouds.
to the intricacies of Into the Woods.
My champion, my favorite. I should have laid a spell on him right there.
The force of his creative brilliance led the musical to become an art form that could express ideas and emotions at the highest level.
9-time Tony winner. So he's one of those composers that, is in the top 3 to 5, I'd say, right?
HBO did a documentary. We're interviewed with him. He's done a lot of great music. I'm not the biggest Broadway fan, but when I started seeing the amount of music he wrote, I go, absolutely.
Yeah, he was kind of right on that same level with Andrew Lloyd Webber.
All right. So it sounds like we're pretty much yeses all around. We'll say yes to him. All right. How about Eddie Mecca, actor, otherwise known as the Big Ragu?
The Big Ragu.
Vern and Shirley, Carmine.
No.
He was also in Blansky's Beauties and Top of the World. Whatever.
He went from rags to ditches.
So, Scott, you're a no to the Big Ragu?
I'm a no. That guy was such a spare.
Honestly, I also am a no. I mean,
it shocks you. It shocks you.
That was all he ever did.
Wow, I would have said yes. I mean,
you still can. There's still hope.
He was
for
no
him
Lenny
yet.
or Squiggy.
All right, I'm gonna say no.
Should the Big Ragu have been in a bunch of spaghetti westerns?
I like it.
Last that I have for November is Lee Elder, who was a golfer, the first African American to play the Masters tournament.
Lee Elder shattered barriers in golf world as the first African American to play in the Masters. Tiger Woods once said Elder paved the way for guys like him. He called him the first, the one he looked up to.
He was the precursor, I guess you could say, to Tiger Woods, and that kind of broke barriers for African Americans.
I think Berman's nickname for him is not getting any elder.
So I think this is a first ballot, right? Pretty huge name in golf.
Sure, we'll go for it.
So we'll say yes then to Mr. Elder. So that's all I had for November. So let's see what the honorable mentions are.
Maureen Cleave was a British writer, and she is the one who did the interview with John Lennon when he said they're greater than Jesus.
If it had said television is more popular than Jesus, I might have got away with it.
I don't think she's in, but I thought that was a pretty significant passing.
Inventor of the cleave.
But didn't he play for Michigan State?
Marilyn McLeod wrote Love Hangover.
Diana Ross hit
yes.
I like that song. But
yeah, that is a good song. I got the sweetest hangover. I don't want to get over.
We don't need no cure. Sweet love hangover. We don't need no cure.
I got the sweetest hangover. I don't want to get over.
We don't need no cure. We don't need no cure. Sweet love hangover.
Billy Hinchy from Dino, Desi, and Billy.
He was the spare of that
he was
threesome.
The spare of that threesome. Yes, he was.
Man.
So it was Desi and Lucy's kid and Dean Martin's kid were the other two guys,
and then
right?
he's their friend, right? So talk about riding on
No,
coattails.
out.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a no.
Bob Barker, not the game show host, is a Doctor Who writer. Wrote pretty significant Doctor Who episodes. I don't think that's enough, but I wanted to give him some love. And then Andrew Vosh, VACHSS, pretty successful writer. Did a lot of serial killers and thrillers. Not someone that I like, though. He wrote a couple of good Batman stories, but I would not push him to say, hey, he should be on the list.
All right, so let's kind of review the ones that you had. So Maureen Cleave, the inventor of the cleavage shot.
Yeah.
I think that was a no, right?
Right.
Marilyn McLeod, the writer of Love Hangover. I'm kind of on the fence on that one. Maybe she didn't sing it, so...
And it's like, that's just one notable song. You got to have more of a track record than that.
All right.
Billy Hinchy sounds like he's a spare, right?
Yes.
Yes.
He is.
The lesser Bob Barker, the Doctor Who writer.
I got to stick with the Eddie Robinson rule there.
Yeah, exactly. If you're not the most,
And then Andrew Bosch was the writer that you weren't even a fan of, Jesse. You just wanted to bring up his name.
Yes, exactly.
So I think we have no's all around for those.
I think so too.
You have one more that I don't think any of you are going to want to count. The Dolphin Winter, that they wrote the Dolphin's Tale about the dolphin with the prosthetic tail.
Oh, yes.
That dolphin died.
I considered that, but I wasn't sure if we were going to count animals or not.
I think only gorillas get an exemption, like Harambe and Coco.
I think it's different when an animal actor that's been in a couple of movies. It's different than when they flat out write a movie about you.
Like if Free Willy died, then Willie would count, right?
You know what? Gary sold me. He made a good point about the movie.
I
agree.
I say the dolphin goes in.
Yeah,
that better be a big
yes.
bathtub.
Yes.
All right, let's move into the final month of the year. And this one was pretty action-packed. We will start with Stonewall Jackson, not the military person, but the country singer who wrote, or I guess sang Waterloo, not the ABBA song. BJ the DJ? Beej the Deej?
What?
Boy, that sounds like something that happened a lot in the 70s.
He's probably distantly related to me, but I say no.
I kind of figured maybe Millerman had preemptively asked you to use an exemption for this one, Bob, just because he is so knowledgeable on all country music.
He probably would have if he knew, but again, the Eddie Robinson rule holds fast here as well.
The lesser
Who would have
Stonewall
thought
Jackson.
that this Eddie Robinson rule would have
You
been
just
that
remember
much?
this, Bobby Blue Bland.
Yeah, when you pass, We're gonna use the rule against you.
But he gets the P1
Right.
exception.
No,
The
we'll find a-
Eddie Robinson exemption overrides the P1.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All right, so it looks like no's for Stonewall Jackson. Or he's getting stonewalled from this list.
Yes.
Next up, and I think me and Bob are going to be the only yeses on this, but how about Steve Bronski, Scottish keyboardist from Bronski Beat?
Yes.
The greatness of
Tell me what.
Tell me what? Tell me what?
Jesse, do you know what they're talking about?
No.
You're not familiar with Bronski Beat, Jesse?
I am not.
It is so bad.
Now, Bronski Beat is greatness. I support Bronski Beat. They have what, 3, Bob?
Yeah, they've got that. They've got Small Town Boy, and they've got Hit That Perfect Beat Boy. Hit that perfect beat boy. Beat boy. Beat boy. Hit that perfect beat boy. Beat boy. Beat boy. Hit that perfect beat boy. Beat boy. Beat boy. Hit that perfect beat boy. Hit that perfect beat boy.
They're greatness. I'm going to
It
say
sounds
yes.
like the popcorn song. Not
only
Hot butter.
Yeah, hot
Yep.
butter.
Not only am I going to say yes, I have not used an exemption. I'm using my exemption for Bronski Beat.
All right. She's
Veto.
Oh, Gary wants to use a veto.
His,
No, there's no such thing as a veto. He's in because you said he's in, but my God.
So we'll say yes to Bronski Beat, only because of my exemption. Next up, we have Ralph Tavares, who was a singer for the band coincidentally known as Tavares. And they have, what, 2, 3, Bob?
They've got It Only Takes a Minute, Girl, to Fall in Love. It only takes a minute, girl, to fall in love. To fall in love.
Well, that's a pretty major song.
They had the big one from Saturday Night Fever. They did More Than a Woman, right?
Yeah, they did the other version of More Than a Woman. Not
Their
the Bee Gees
version was actually better than the Bee Gees version.
More Than a Woman. More than a
But there was
woman
one
to
other
me.
song they had too, wasn't there? Hey, wait, didn't they do Heaven Must Be Missing an Angel? Heaven Must Be Missing an Angel?
Yes,
That was
they
in
did.
Charlie's
That's their
Angels.
third one. Yes.
I'm going to say yes.
Wow, Jesse. Scott?
No.
100% on Scott.
So Gary's a no. Bob?
I count them, but I think Gary would only count Leote Tavares.
I enjoy all of Tavares' catalog. I celebrate his catalog. So I'm gonna say yes to Ralph Tavares, and that's gonna get him in. So next up, we have former NFL wide receiver Demaryius Thomas.
Oh,
played for the
yes.
Broncos, the Jets, the Texans. Won a Super Bowl in 2016 with the Broncos. Was probably their best receiver during that run, right?
Yeah, he put up some pretty good fantasy numbers, dude. He was solid.
I'm gonna say yes on Mr. Thomas. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Gary, you're a yes.
He's a yes.
Bob?
Yeah.
Well, that's 3. Jesse, did you know him?
No, I didn't.
Scott?
Nah, no.
Both of you are overwritten. We're going to say yes. How about Al Unser, Hall of Fame racing driver,
Senior?
4-time Indianapolis 500 winner, won the IndyCar Championship in 83 and 85. It doesn't say junior, so I assume he is the senior.
And he was the sheriff on Sons of Anarchy.
Wow, there is a curse, a Sons of Anarchy curse.
Yes,
They're just doing a bit. There was a character named Unser on there.
Well, not only that, there is an Unser curse because I want to say one of the Unsers passed away.
Was it Bobby?
Bobby died in 21.
Yeah, I remember there was another Unser that we mentioned, and we kind of rubber stamped any Unsers.
These days, NASCAR is so huge, but back in the 70s, I remember watching all the IndyCar races, especially the Indy 500, and those Unsers were dominant, man. The Al and Bobby and Al Jr., they were always. So I definitely would count them.
Gary?
Yeah, I'll get Al Unser. He's in.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we'll say yes to Unser. How about, this is a local one, but a pretty significant local one. Dave Campbell, American sports journalist, founder of the Dave Campbell's Texas Football periodical. I think this is a huge, huge death among sports fans in this area, but is it enough of a national death to count him?
Dave Campbell's Texas Football was like the Bible of college football, man. That was huge every year that came out. And then they got to the point where they also talked about NFL, Cowboys and Oilers in there. So yeah, I would count him.
Yeah.
Gary?
Definitely.
Yeah, I would count him too. I definitely know the name, definitely know the magazine.
When I was in high school, I would actually read Dave Campbell's football to try to scout players on the other teams that we were going to play.
Yeah, they would talk about high school in
High
there
school
too,
football,
yeah.
yes. All right. Next up, and we just did an episode about this guy with PD not too long ago. How about Michael Nesmith, a musician for the Monkees, songwriter?
Oh, yes.
He wrote
Yes.
Different Drum, Joanne, Grammy winner in 1982. This is a big one, right?
If you ever watched
yeah.
the documentary about MTV, they flat out said there would be no MTV without him. Like they got the idea from him. They wanted him to be the original president of the network. He turned him down, but he was huge.
Born in Houston, Texas, the son of Betty Nesmith Graham, the inventor of liquid paper. Picked up in a screen test and transformed into part of an instant pop sensation, Nesmith not the star, but a force in a supporting role. He fought for the Monkees to be able to write and record their own material and for creative control of their music. The band merely a launchpad to a long and successful career, his second act behind the camera, a producer and director of films and creator of a music video format that eventually led to MTV.
I got to see him a month before his death. Mickey Dolenz, the only two surviving, were touring, and I had bought this before COVID. They ended up at the Grand Prairie. You could tell he was not doing well. Did tell a funny story. You mentioned Different Drum. When he was in the Monkees, he went to him and said, "Hey, I've written a song. I think we should record it." And they said, "Well, it doesn't sound like a monkey song." And he says, "Well, I'm a monkey. I wrote it." And so he said he just happened to handle it to this young singer, Linda Ronstadt, and it became a big hit. And it sounds like he's done a lot of work outside the Monkees, and, a significant loss.
Yeah, because I mean, he basically invented music videos. His mom invented liquid paper. He's very notable.
The guy's a legendary guy. I mean, that's just all there is to it.
I read an article recently about him where he was saying that when the Eagles got real big in the early 70s, it made him so depressed and angry because he had done exactly the same music right before they blew up.
All right, so we're going to say yes then to Michael Nesmith. Next up, we have American author Anne Rice from the Vampire Chronicles, and obviously, I think she did an Interview with a Vampire, which are significant books and turned into a movie. I think
she's also in the Richardson High School Hall of Fame with Gordo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a time when she was the writer in popular fiction. Pretty significant.
Junior, do you have any pictures of Anne Rice?
Have you read the Sleeping Beauty series?
Yeah, the Sleeping Beauty trilogy, yes. We read that one.
If they're going to make a movie out of something, they ought to make a movie out of that.
Heck yes.
Look, 50 Shades of Grey would be embarrassed if it
All right, so we will put Anne Rice in. This next one caused some pretty significant sorrow and mourning on the P1CR. How about Vicente Fernandez, who was one of the greatest Mexican singers of all time?
The 1972 song Volver, Volver is a Vicente Fernandez classic and his greatest hit. He had several hits in his long career, and according to his website, more than 100 albums. His music selling more than 50 million copies. Over time, he became one of Mexico's most recognizable and influential figures. Besides being called the Sinatra of rancheras, fans also gave him the nickname El Rey, or the King. That's also the title of one of his other most memorable songs. He branched into the acting world in the 1970s. His first hit movie was La Ley del Monte. He also did the soundtrack. He spent 20 years combining acting and singing, but singing won out, and it's how he spent his life, entertaining with song.
This is kind of like the equivalent of...
Is he like the Mexican Neil Diamond?
Yeah, or like somebody like that, of that kind of stature dying here, or Paul McCartney dying and how England would feel.
Is he like a Tony Bennett?
Yeah, like a Sinatra level kind of person in Mexico. Yeah, I think any listeners we had from the P1CR, if we did not vote this guy in, I think they would immediately boycott and revoke their Spotify subscriptions to us.
Well, then,
dressed like Johnny Bravo.
even if you don't want to rubber stamp it, he's got 3 Grammys, 9 Latin Grammys. He's on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He sold over 50 million copies.
He was also in a lot of movies too. He was
Even
an
if you're
actor.
not trying to appease the P1CR, that guy's
in Telemundo.
So yeah, I think we're gonna have to put Vicente Fernandez in.
Oh, see.
All right. Next up, we have Desmond Tutu, South African Anglican prelate and civil rights activist, Bishop of Johannesburg in the 80s. I knew nothing about the guy, but I have recognized the name from news and late night bits. Yeah, late night bits. I think this one is a yes, right?
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
in for
absolutely.
me.
Yes.
Yeah,
definitely in for me.
All right, so we'll say yes to Mr. Tutu. How about Ted Gardner, who was an Australian music manager? His biggest claim to fame, he was the co-founder of Palooza, which was, I'd say in the 90s, one of the biggest music festivals, I guess you would say, going. I think that's pretty significant. I guess him and Perry Farrell must have co-founded it together from Jane's Addiction.
Jane's Addiction, yeah.
Is that enough to get Mr. Gardner in?
I mean, Lollapalooza is a big deal, man.
pretty big.
Yeah, I think so.
But I've never heard of him.
Never heard of him either, but
that's pretty significant.
All right, so Jesse, you're a yes?
Yeah, I am.
Bob Gary?
Yeah, I count it.
Then I think we're going to put him in. All right. Now we're getting into 3, I think, first ballots here. First up, the great and possibly biggest death, at least one of the top 3, the great John Madden, who just had a documentary done right before he passed in December.
John Madden was a true titan in a sport of giants. Injury would keep Madden from playing in the NFL, but at just 32, the Oakland Raiders hired him as their head coach in 1969. That's where he would begin to build a legacy, storming the sidelines, carrying the team to a Super Bowl 11 victory, and never allowing a losing record in his 10 years with the franchise. Retiring from coaching at just 42, he turned to the broadcasting booth. Over 3 decades, calling more than 500 games. Madden influencing generations of football and gaming fans, helping to develop the blockbuster video game series that bears his name, selling more than 250 million copies since its debut more than 30 years ago.
Obviously, in addition to being a Hall of Fame coach, was instrumental in getting the Madden video game series up, which is the biggest football video game in all of video game history. Huge death.
Yeah, because
what did he do? I mean, really?
he could get in just as a coach or just as a broadcaster or just for the video game.
he might be able to get it on Miller Lite commercials.
Is that how he goes through the gates in heaven, busts through the gates?
Like I was saying, light beer tastes great. And another thing.
Hey, St. Peter, I'm here.
All right, so John Madden is definitely in. Next up, we have Sam Jones, who was a Hall of Fame basketball player for the Boston Celtics, won 10 NBA championships in that Celtics run in the 60s, along with Bill Russell.
Sam Jones.
He is a big deal.
He is a huge deal. Now, for the non-NBA people on this panel, I assume you guys are not familiar with him. I'd say he's a yes. One of the things that I remember most about Sam Jones is when Havlicek steals the ball.
Johnny
Most clip that they always run. He always passes it over to Sam Jones.
He gets it out deep, and Havlicek steals it. Over to Sam Jones. Havlicek stole the ball. It's all over.
So, Bob, Gary, you guys are yes for Sam Jones,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Yeah, and I would have been a yes. Jesse, Scott, have you guys even heard of Sam Jones?
Yeah, I've heard
No,
of
but
Sam.
Oh, Scott knew him.
yeah, that's
Believe it or not.
that's enough.
Yeah, any athlete Scott's heard of in
That's automatic. And the last name we have on the list could also be considered the biggest death of 2021. How about Betty White?
May 8, 2010. Betty White making history at the age of 88, becoming the oldest person to host Saturday Night Live. This after 500,000 people on Facebook petitioned the show to give her a shot at hosting. She was on television from the very beginnings of TV. In 1952, co-producing her own comedy show, Life with Elizabeth. But she is best known for 2 signature TV roles, Sue Ann Nevins, the happy homemaker on The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and Rose Nyland on The Golden Girls. Well into her 80s, White showed no sign of slowing down, with appearances on late-night comedy shows and commercial work.
You're playing like Betty White out there.
That's not what your girlfriend said.
Actress, Golden Girls, Mary Tyler Moore Show, 5-time Emmy winner. Huge death, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it is hard to pick between those two, right? Madden and Betty White. Both just cultural, so significant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge,
And unfortunately, what was it? People Magazine Academy Runner
Yeah.
said
They
that she
sure
was
did.
celebrating her 100th birthday and then she died like right before. So we'll say yes to Betty White then, right?
Oh, yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Okay, so let's take a look at the honorable mentions.
All
Okay,
right.
how can Bob Dole be an honorable mention?
Okay, so Bob Dole,
Bob Dole.
politician, and Dan Aykroyd did him on Saturday Night Live, right?
Yes.
Well, so did Norm Macdonald.
Oh, yes.
That's right. He did.
They did that
Third
real
person,
world
right?
bit where Bob Dole lived in the real world house.
Who ate Bob Dole's peanut butter?
Who the hell ate my peanut butter? Peanut butter.
I guess I did. Why?
Yeah, well, it's all gone. Next time, ask. Nobody eats Bob Dole's peanut butter without asking.
Yeah, that's a big omission on my part. So I think that's a first ballot, Bob Dole.
Yeah.
Any other ones?
Wayne Thibault has influenced painters since the 1950s till the day he died in December. Every art teacher that you know knows this guy's work. He's got shows, exhibitions all over the world. The Crocker Museum has had a yearly exhibition of his work since 1951. His two biggest paintings to sell, November 2019, he sold one for $8.46 million. And in 2020, he sold one for $19 million.
So when Wayne Thibault sits down to paint, he just paints.
Okay, Norm.
When Mozart sits down to paint, he just paints.
I'm looking at the imagery. I do not recognize any of the images, but God, they're very striking.
He was a pop artist before there was pop art. He basically...
So he was pre-Warhol?
Yes, he was pre-Warhol.
I don't know anything about him, but I like the art.
Yes, Scott made a compelling argument.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I agree.
All right, so we'll say yes to Thibault.
Larry Sellers. If you watch TV in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, if there was an Indian character in the movie, there's about 4 or 5 guys that were going to be.
Yeah, there's like 4 or 5 of them.
He's one of those guys. But his biggest thing was probably Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. He was in a lot of episodes of that.
He was in Sopranos. He played one of the professors. Wow.
He looks familiar. Yeah, I think I recognize his face.
You've had to have seen him.
He was Naked Indian in Wayne's World 2.
Oh, wow.
Put him in.
All right, so everybody's a yes for Mr. Sellers.
Yeah, I don't have any reservations about putting him in.
So I have 2.
Okay.
The first one, Bridget Ann Elizabeth Hanley. She played Candy on Here Comes the Bride. And I loved Here Comes the Bride. If you ever watched the series, you would recognize her. She was someone I had a huge crush on before I knew what
I omitted
crushes
her
were.
from my wall, but damn it, that's right.
She didn't have a lot other things, but that's her main role. Like I said, I don't expect anyone else to.
Well, you can use an exemption, Jess.
My other one is Ken Cragen, who was Lionel Richie, Kenny Rogers, Harry Chapin's
Producer,
manager.
Right? Or manager,
and he is one of the people who organized We Are the World.
Yeah, I recognize the name immediately.
And so I think that's pretty significant.
So let's take a look. Bridget Ann Elizabeth Henley. Does anybody want to say yes?
I will give her a yes.
I mean, sure, why not?
Thanks. I appreciate that, Bob.
Gary, would you have been a no?
I probably would have said no, but I actually recognize her. I'm looking at her right now.
I'm giving it a Jesse yes.
I loved Here Comes the Bride. Just a really, really fun series. Like I said, I had such a crush on her.
And how about Ken Cragen?
Pretty significant. I mean, Lionel Richie, Kenny Rogers, he was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, release the Cragen.
Yes.
All right, so we'll put him in as well.
You tend to forget who was the most significant death of the year. And I know we lost some earlier in 2021. Betty White, though, and John Madden, pretty tough to beat.
All right, so I have added all of the yeses. And with all of our honorable mentions, we ended up with a total of 51 names, which is 11 over the original number of 40 that we started with. So as you can see, I did an extremely poor job of compiling this list. But that is definitely taking the over, which means that I, with a 35 guess, actually win the showcase showdown. But pretty significant number of deaths all around, even without the honorable mention. So like you were saying, Jesse, Betty White, John Madden are huge names.
Prince Philip would be in the discussion.
That's definitely right
Dusty
up there.
Hill.
Gary's cousin, I believe. Hank Aaron was a huge one.
Boy, Hank Aaron, yeah.
Rush Limbaugh, Richard Donner, Ed Asner, Charlie Watts. Those are all big ones. But yeah, if we're talking about for the entire year, give me John Madden.
Like I said, I certainly think Betty White, Prince Philip are pretty significant. Stephen Sondheim, if you're in the Broadway. But I could go with Madden.
Right.
In just pop culture.
I think I would probably have put Betty White before him, only because I think Betty White probably crossed more lines than John Madden did.
All right, guys, thank you as always. Coming up, we're going to have a NFL season roundup with UK Mark joining us. But for now, for Scott, Bob, Gary Jr., and me, Jesse, we're going to say thank you, and we will talk to you soon.